For all my hope that moderation and pragmatism will prevail in this country, I found the results of a new survey to be really depressing. According to a poll released yesterday by YouGov, nearly 4 in 10 respondents, 37%, believe there will be a civil war here in the United States in the next 10 years. And only 40% of Americans say there likely won't be, meaning 6 in 10 Americans believe civil war is likely or at least possible. Can we please pause and talk about how insane that is? Those numbers are truly mind-boggling, and I don't buy it. People are only thinking or talking this way because of the highly politicized media and extreme politicians trying to cater them. You see it in magazines. The New Yorker published an article like this titled, "The Risk of a New American Civil War." But really, is the risk of an actual civil war real? How many people do you know who will actually take up arms to fight against fellow Americans? Yet a search of transcripts from the biggest 3 cable news networks shows the term civil war has been mentioned 714 times in the last month, more than once every 3 hours on all 3 networks. So who can blame people who think a civil war is coming? That's certainly the impression you get when you watch politicized cable news over at MSNBC. Some of their hosts have gone so far as to say the Civil War has already begun, and of course that the other side started it.
At this point, I do think we have to have serious conversations around preparing for actual violence. People keep saying a civil war is coming. I would say a civil war is here.
There is real talk that is, not fanciful about whether the United States can continue as a republic, whether we have to break up into a couple of countries.
Now, this type of rhetoric is certainly occurring on the far right as well. Last month, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene reacted on Twitter to the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago, saying, "This is the rogue behavior of communist countries, not the United States of America. These are the types of things that happen in countries during civil war." Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox News went even further.
If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information, there'll be riots in the streets.
Look, there's no doubt that the country has deep issues right now, deep divisions that need to be addressed. But ultimately, the vast majority of us are moderates, left-leaning or right-leaning, but moderates. And while the phrase civil war is great for headlines and outrage and fear, in the end, I think we all enjoy our moderate, mundane lives too much to be killing one another over politics. Yes, the extremists will try to enrage us and scare us, and the numbers are showing that a disturbing number of people are hearing it. But it's a lot easier to gin up outrage about a civil war and talk about it than it is to actually go and fight one. Joining us now is Dr. Lauren Wright. She's a political commentator and political scientist at Princeton University. She has studied this topic extensively. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so what do you make of this new poll?
So something is really important to point out right off the bat. The belief that a civil war will occur is totally different for support for political violence or support for a civil war. And so buried in that YouGov survey that you just cited, you will see that 69% of Americans think civil war would be a bad thing for the country, and that includes equal portions of Democrats and Republicans. Now, even if you dig into the 6% who say it would be a good thing, researchers like Sean Westwood and Dartmouth and some others have dug into these numbers, and they show that even polls that show a high percentage of support for political violence are vastly overblown once you account for these very simple corrections, vagueness in wording about violence, or people not paying attention.
I'm going to take a deep breath and say, okay, that's great
Right.
to hear. What role does the media play in all of this, do you think?
So I think you have it about right. I think maybe one of the reasons people expect there to be a civil war is because they're constantly being told there will be a civil war. And so I do think there's this self-reinforcing process. But, we also need to take a gut check here and realize that many people don't even vote. For people to care enough about politics, which we know most Americans don't, they have a lot of other concerning matters in their day-to-day lives, it is an extreme point of view that they'll take up arms against one another if as you mentioned, they sometimes won't even take a trip to the polls. In 2020, we had the highest ever turnout in a presidential election at 66%. In the 2018 midterms, about 53% of people turned out to vote. And so, you know, this is a society in which we can't even prove that people have very many of these ideological views. A lot of times they have mixed opinions on a lot of issues. And so once you account for the very small number of people at this extreme end of the scale, and then the people who would actually act on those extreme views, it's a concerning but extremely small sliver of the American public, and that always needs to be put into context.
So I think what's happening is a lot of people are using the term civil war, and they mean it more rhetorically than they do actually taking up arms. Well,
that's bad.
Right?
That's bad enough. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I'm not saying, and therefore it's okay. But
yes.
but when people, you know, you heard Tiffany Cross on MSNBC. The civil war has already started, right? Well, the civil war obviously hasn't started, right? There is no war that started here in this country. Her point is there's a divide. And I think that, you know, I think that's really what people are trying to say, but it's scary talk. I mean, it is scary stuff, and it's being pushed by the extremists. And
yes, and so let's think of a very, very scary, very timely example of January 6th. We also hear all the time that another January 6th is right around a corner. These things are going to start happening more often. But let's think about that. I mean, the DOJ, law enforcement agencies are paying more attention to these types of risks than ever before. About 1,000 people have been arrested who participated in that day. And there's been a massive bureaucratic and congressional response. And so if anything, we should expect events like that to perhaps be less likely, and remind ourselves that as dark of a day as it was in American history and 5 people died, the efforts of these violent extremists were an utter failure. They did not succeed when very few people were paying attention, and arguably they had some cheerleading from the White House. And so in the future, when everyone is looking out for this risk, we should not expect there to be the same likelihood of violence.
Lauren Wright with an important reality check. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks,
really appreciate it. Coming up, thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.